It is incredibly easy to build a massive, angry mob on the internet. It is incredibly difficult to get those same people to log off, walk outside, and physically stand in front of a line of riot police. In mid-May, a new political entity appeared online, the Cockroach Janta Party. It started as pure satire, a sarcastic response to a court hearing where unemployed youth and critics were allegedly compared to parasites and cockroaches. Young Indians took the insult and adopted it as a badge of honor. The joke quickly hardened into political anger. The trigger was a string of massive failures in India's education system, specifically the severe NEET UG exam paper leaks and the chaos surrounding the CBSE on-screen marking system. Students who had been studying for years suddenly felt their futures evaporating. All that frustration zeroed in on a single strict demand: the immediate resignation of Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. The state's initial reaction was to shut the movement down digitally. The group's account was withheld in India, and organizers reported accounts were hacked or suspended. When the Delhi High Court refused to grant immediate legal relief just days before a planned demonstration, the digital oxygen was cut off. By the eve of June 6th, that digital suffocation forced a critical decision. The organizers couldn't rely on algorithms anymore. They had to test whether their followers would actually show up in person, or if the movement would remain an angry internet meme. The morning of June 6th started with intense uncertainty. Delhi police publicly stated they had not received any formal request for a protest. For anyone planning to attend, this signaled a high probability of mass arrests or physical clashes with law enforcement. At 7:30 a.m., founder Abhijit Dipke landed at Delhi's airport. Before he could even leave the terminal, police intercepted him to question him about his plans. Then, the authorities made a highly unusual pivot. Instead of detaining him, officers had him sign a routine declaration right there at the airport and handed him a same-day, one-day permit to protest. This administrative leniency existed alongside overwhelming physical force. While the permit was granted, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 police and paramilitary personnel were actively locking down central Delhi. The sudden grant of permission at the airport changed the day's trajectory. By authorizing the event, the police removed the friction of an illegal assembly, shifting the narrative away from a confrontation over the right to protest and toward a sanctioned, managed sit-in. The crowd at Jantar Mantar was a cross-section of Indian aspiration: 12th grade students from Noida, parents who had traveled from Tripura, and gig workers who had skipped a day's wages to be there. The organizers knew how heavily policed they were, and they enforced strict tactical discipline. They pushed clear instructions to their followers: ignore provocateurs, stay entirely peaceful, and obey the police lines. The protesters shielded themselves using a specific visual vocabulary. They carried the Indian tricolor and educational textbooks, and they physically handed flowers to the deployed police officers. The core of this strategy was the Constitution itself. Holding up copies of the document framed their anger as an act of patriotic dissent, rather than an anti-state rebellion. When prominent activist Sonam Wangchuk arrived carrying a rose, it reinforced the tone. Aside from police preventatively detaining 6 people nearby to stop a separate clash with rivals, the main sit-in remained completely peaceful. This highly deliberate, non-violent aesthetic operated as a political shield. By pairing grievances with books, flowers, and the national flag, the organizers made it difficult for the state to justify a forceful dispersal or label the participants as a threat to order. By 3 p.m., the street action concluded. Delhi police even took to social media that evening to officially deny rumors that any FIRs had been filed against the participants. But the de-escalation on the ground didn't mean the movement was backing down. That evening, organizers issued a ticking 7-day ultimatum to the Prime Minister to remove the Education Minister. Opposition figures quickly moved in to harness this momentum. Leaders across multiple parties threw their public support behind the students, validating their grievances nationally. The ruling BJP's response largely bypassed the exam controversies. Instead, they focused on questioning the movement's legitimacy, with officials accusing the group of relying on foreign influence and pushing the youth toward negative politics. Organizers used this data to immediately counter the government's narrative. By showing that over 94% of their followers were located within India, they attempted to prove that the movement was a domestic reaction to domestic failures. Despite the massive digital footprint and political shockwaves, the physical turnout was a stark reality check. The real-world crowd at Jantar Mantar was measured in the hundreds, not the millions. The day's significance lay in the transition from a meme to a physical presence. The CJP demonstrated that by pairing satirical dissent with strict constitutional symbolism, a youth movement could occupy a space like Jantar Mantar and leave without a single FIR or a violent dispersal.